Well, good morning, everyone. You know, about 30 years ago, maybe not long after Carrie and I were married, we bought our house here in San Jose. And, we got a pretty good deal on it, frankly, mainly because the previous owner had let it fall into disrepair. I remember the first time we saw the house, well, actually it was kind of hard to see the house because it was obscured by weeds. It had grown about 5 or 6 feet in height. The front yard was like a forest of weeds. And so when we moved in, the first thing I did is I get rid of all those weeds. Right? And the neighbors were thrilled, of course. But then the next step was to put in a lawn, right? And so one morning I was beginning that lawn project. I was out in the front yard digging trenches for irrigation pipe. And this guy comes over, a guy by the name of Dave. And I had met Dave once. He was a neighbor. He lived a couple of doors down. But I didn't really know him. Well, Dave came over with a shovel. He says, "I'm here to help." Right? Well, I was thrilled to get the help, of course. So together, Dave and I landscaped my front yard. And in the process, we became pretty good friends. And then a couple of years later, Dave got a job transfer, back east somewhere. So he sold his house, took his family, moved back east. And regrettably, Dave and I kind of lost contact after that. So that was it. Right? He was gone. Nowhere to be found. Well, today, the church celebrates the Ascension of the Lord Jesus. And for 40 days after his resurrection, Jesus appeared to his disciples. He walked with them, talked with them, sat down with them and shared meals with them. He continued to teach them. And at the end of those 40 days, as we heard in the first reading from the Acts of the Apostles, he was taken up into heaven, lifted up on a cloud. So that was it. Right? He was gone. Nowhere to be found. Right? Wrong. Well, yes, he did ascend into heaven. He is seated at the right hand of God. We know that. He wasn't hanging out with the apostles anymore, wasn't walking and talking with them, wasn't sitting down with them for a meal. But he was still present with them. And he is still present with us here today. He is present in this holy sacrifice of the Mass, present in the Word proclaimed, present in the Holy Eucharist. He is present here in this assembly in believers. Jesus Christ is present in every human being made in the image and likeness of God. But so often we fail to recognize Jesus. We get busy, right? We get caught up in our daily activities. We don't recognize Jesus because we don't expect to see him. We're not looking for him. One evening, about 6 or 7 years ago, Carrie and I had just finished dinner. And we were sitting down to watch a ball game on TV. And the doorbell rang. So I went and answered the door. There's this guy standing on the front porch. I didn't recognize him. And he steps into the house and he gives me a big hug. He says, "Phil, it's so good to see you." And I'm freaking out. I have no idea who this guy is. And he sensed my confusion. He says, "You don't recognize me, do you?" And I looked at him. It was Dave, my old friend and neighbor. And he had been in town on business. And he took a chance that we might still live there, that we might be home. And it was so good to see him. I invited him in, of course, and we had a really great evening together, kind of catching up, sharing stories, reminiscing. But I was a little bit embarrassed that I didn't recognize him. Well, it had been like 20 years since we'd seen each other. We had both aged just a little, right? Our hair was not quite as dark in the hair as you used to be. Not quite as much hair as we used to have. Dave had a lot less hair, frankly. But he hadn't changed that much. I didn't recognize Dave because I wasn't expecting to see him. I wasn't looking for him. And maybe you've had a similar experience like that where you didn't recognize someone you knew. I think in the last year when everybody's wearing masks, that happens more than it used to. But if we don't recognize the face of our friends when we're not looking for them, it's not a surprise that we don't recognize the face of Jesus in others when we're not looking for him. But if we do look for Jesus, we will recognize him. If you look around the church right now, you see the faces of the people in front of you, behind you, to your right, to your left. You will see the face of Jesus if you're looking for him. When we leave the church today and we see our friends, our family members, when we see the faces of strangers, we will see the face of Jesus if we're looking for him. Now, if you were walking down the street and you happen to pass by Jesus, would you pause and greet him? Would you offer him help if he needed help? Or would you just kind of put your head down and keep walking, pretending like you didn't notice? I think most of us, if we truly knew it was Jesus, we would stop. And most of us, if we didn't recognize Jesus, we'd just keep going. But whether we recognize him or not, it's Jesus, present in every human being made in the image and likeness of God. And so this week, for your homework, I invite you to look for Jesus. Look for Jesus in your friends, your family members, your co-workers. Look for Jesus especially in the strangers that you encounter. How will those encounters be different when we recognize Jesus?